With every new FIFA release, it seemed like defending was an ever-present problem, and now that we made the transition to FC24, seems like nothing's changed. Countless players are still struggling to keep the ball out of their own net, and if that sounds like something you can relate to, I've got good news for you. Most of the problems that you have defending can be fixed very, very easily. So, I'm going to give you 10 tips for how you can improve your defending, and later in the video, I'll share with you the most common mistake that people have when they are struggling to defend. However, before we get into those tips, you have to make sure that things aren't more difficult than they need to be before you even step out on the field. So that means we need to take a look at the settings. Firstly, you want to make sure you're using the new advanced defending system. This gives you access to the new shoulder tackle input and gives you more freedom to decide how you want to defend in a given situation. Make sure auto clearances is turned on so the AI will clear the ball when you don't have the time to react. And make sure clearance assist is set to directional so you can ensure the ball is actually cleared to a safe area of the field. Finally, make sure auto switching is set to on air balls and loose balls. Make sure right stick switching is set to adaptive and right stick switching preference is set to player relative. Right stick switching sensitivity is personal preference. Now, when you are ready to step out onto the pitch, the first and most important tip is to remember that defending is about positioning, not tackling. Maintaining good positioning, both as a team and with individual players, can force the opposition into making mistakes, like trying to force a pass that isn't on or trying to dribble out of trouble. And in those situations, you often don't even need to make a tackle to regain possession. And even if you do need to make a tackle, it will have been the good positioning of your players that will have enabled you to do that in the first place. So successfully putting a stop to opposition attacks and successfully regaining possession depends far more on positioning than it does on tackling. Which brings us on to tip number 2. In order to maintain good positioning, you need to switch players frequently. Chasing the ball all over the pitch with a single player leads to breakdowns in your formation, pulling players out of position and warping your team's shape. Instead, make sure you're following the ball not with a player but with the entire team. Press with an individual when the ball is in the area that player is responsible for, but make sure you're quick to switch players when the opposition passes across the field or switches the play. This will allow you to maintain your shape, will allow your players to maintain their positions, and will give you a more robust foundation to defend from. Switching with LB is fine most of the time, but you might need to manually switch with the right stick when you have a number of players in close proximity, and that's why it's important to get those settings right before you start a game. Another way you can ensure you maintain the integrity of your team's formation is by utilizing the teammate press, which is tip number 3. A really effective approach is using one player to take away a passing option, whilst using RB to instruct a teammate to press the ball carrier. This ensures that you can pressure your opposition without dragging your players out of position. I would particularly recommend using this approach high up the field rather than your own defensive third, and I'd recommend only using a single player to press rather than using the team press option, which can cause your team shape to break down. Taking away a passing option is not only useful when utilizing the teammate press, but is what you should be doing the majority of the time, which is why tip 4 is to cut passing lanes. Again, positioning is the most important element of defending, not tackling, and you want to take up a position between the ball carrier and his primary passing option. Cutting this passing lane means the ball carrier is forced to look elsewhere to release the ball, and your CPU teammates should be marking these options. This is what forces the opponent into mistakes. They're forced either to try a pass to a marked player, which can allow you to make an interception, or they're forced to hold on to the ball, which can allow you to close in and make the tackle. Either way, it's your initial decision to position yourself in the primary passing lane that's going to allow you to win the ball back. Now, sometimes you'll find yourself in a situation where there is more than one passing lane to cut, and that's why tip number 5 is to always take away the inside option. The middle of the field is far more dangerous than the sidelines. If a player possesses the ball in the middle of the pitch, they can pass the ball to their left, to their right, they can dribble either direction, they can shoot from distance. Whereas if they possess the ball out wide, their options are far more limited. They're essentially forced to either pass the ball backwards or dribble straight forwards. The other advantage to forcing the ball out wide is being able to utilize the sideline as an additional defender. Since the opposition obviously doesn't want to run the ball out of play, the sideline acts almost like a second defender that you can sandwich the ball carrier between. So far we've talked mostly about defending as a team, but you'll also need to know how to defend one-on-one if you're going to improve your overall defendance. That's where we get into tip number 6. When you do manage to force the ball out wide, you have to be able to position yourself correctly to force the opposition down the sideline, rather than allowing them back towards the middle of the park. The instinct most players have is to position their defenders directly in front of the attacker, between the ball and the goal line. This just gives the attacker far too many options, one of which is to take the ball back inside. They can dribble inside or out, pass either way, or depending on their position, take a shot at goal. Instead, you want to position your defender high up the field and on the inside shoulder of the attacker. This completely removes their ability to dribble or pass inside and leaves them only with the option of passing backwards or dribbling down the line. This should be something you're absolutely fine with. If they pass backwards, they're moving away from your goal and you can continue to press them. If they dribble down the line, you can follow and stop the cross. Even if the opposition winger has a pace advantage and you end up getting beaten, because they only have a single option available to them, you know the ball will be coming across into the box and you can react with your centre backs or your goalkeeper accordingly. It's all about limiting the options that your opponent has available to them. Tip number 7 is another important thing to remember in these one-on-one situations, and that is to stay goal side and don't gamble. Again, defending is more about positioning than it is tackling. If you get your position right between the ball carrier and the goal, you may not even need to put in a tackle. And if you do end up needing to put a tackle in, being patient can allow you to do that from an advantageous position, where the tackle is more likely to be successful. Gambling by lunging in too early is just going to leave you exposed in behind and lead to more of those goal scoring opportunities. Now, obviously you can't defend using positioning alone. At some point during the game, you are going to have to put a tackle in. And that's why tip number 8 is to make sure you choose the right tackle input. Using the new advanced defending system gives you access to the manual shoulder tackle, but you're still going to be winning the ball back with a stand tackle the majority of the time. Some players avoid using stand tackle because they're scared they'll give away a free kick or even a penalty, but you're simply not going to win the ball back frequently enough simply by jockeying. And if you position yourself like I've told you to, your stand tackles are far more likely to be successful. So don't be afraid to use a stand tackle, especially outside the box. The shoulder tackle should primarily be used in 1v1 dribbling situations, and again, this is where you'll reap the benefits of forcing the attacker down the sideline. Using the sideline as that extra defender, you can run with your opponent and just try to muscle them off the ball. And finally, a well-timed slide tackle can truly change a game, especially with the range of animations that we have access to in FC 24. If the ball is loose or a player is about to run away from you, don't be scared to put in a strong slide tackle to win the ball back. This can stop an opposition attack in its tracks, shift momentum back in your favour, or even spring you into a counter-attack of your own. One thing I've heard a lot from FC 24 players is that it's basically impossible to defend a corner. A corner is basically a goal. But I can almost guarantee you that they are not doing tip number 9, which is to make sure you jockey for headers at corners. If you don't jockey for position, you will be beaten in the air almost every time, but all you need to do is hold down left trigger, possibly make light use of the left stick, and you can maintain your position in the box and win defensive headers. And since we're talking about defending corners, another quick tip is to control the player on the near post when defending a short corner. That player's job is to make goal line clearances in the event of a header, but if the opponent is taking a short corner, then that role becomes obsolete. So instead, move them off the goal line and over towards the corner, and there you can take up a good defensive position of your own and even use the teammate press to apply pressure to the ball carrier when the corner is taken. Which brings us finally on to tip number 10, which is when you've put all that into practice and you've managed to win the ball back from your opponent, for the love of God, keep hold of it. This is the single biggest mistake FC players make that leads them to conceding more goals than they should. They win the ball back and feel like they need to immediately spring into a counter-attack of their own. They try to move the ball forward too quickly, force a pass that isn't on, and they gift possession back to the opponent, who immediately puts them under pressure again. Attack is the best form of defense. Ever heard that saying? Possession is 9/10 of the law. How about that one? When you've done the hard work and you've won the ball back from your opponent, maintain possession first, transition into attack second. Make sure the next player to touch the ball is on your team. Same goes for the player after that and for the player after that. Now, sometimes teams will press you high and they'll prevent you from doing exactly that. In those situations, you might not be able to maintain possession, but you at least need to make sure you don't invite more pressure high up the pitch. Clear the ball from danger, find your shape again, and put your defensive game plan into practice in your opponent's half rather than in your own. So there you have it, 10 simple tips that you can use to improve your defending in EAFC 24. Some of them pretty straightforward, some of them a little bit more difficult to implement, but I guarantee that if you're able to follow them all, you will find yourself being more robust and solid defensively, and you will find yourself conceding fewer goals. If you like this video, make sure you drop a like and subscribe. Appreciate you tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take it easy.